everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective, where we take a look at adaptations based off of Roald Dahl shorts and books. I am Patricia.
My name is Arun.
And with us back from the last episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective we did, we have Jim Bevan. Welcome back, Jim.
Hi, good to be back.
And we have James Sullivan, a.k.a. Jaimetud. So welcome back, James.
Today's broadcast is brought to you by Pigtails, the movie. Pigtails, the movie.
Thank you, Peter Lorre.
That's what it sounds like. Oh my gosh.
But no, it was actually pretty good. So today we're going to be discussing about the newest adaptation based off of a Roald Dahl book. We're going to be talking about the 2020 film Roald Dahl's The Witches, not to be confused with The Witches, which is based off of the 1983 book of the same name, and one that I thought was not going to come out this year due to COVID-19, but they decided to post it exclusively on HBO Max.
I mean, we allowed to say coronavirus in this case on YouTube, but are they still demonetizing videos?
I don't know, to be quite honest.
Okay.
COVID.
There you go.
Anyway, because of the Backstreet Boys reunion tour, unfortunately, we cannot get together to discuss this right now, and we didn't think we were going to be talking about the witches, but here we are. So,
here we are. All right, so let us go into Roald Dahl's The Witches and find out, is it better than the 1990 adaptation? So let's get started. Here we go.
No. End.
Okay, so let's go into the history of this movie right before we actually get started. So this movie was being developed as early as 2008 when Guillermo del Toro of the Hellboy movies and Pan's Labyrinth and Shape of Water, he wanted to do a version of The Witches because he liked reading the original book when he was a kid, and he thought that he would do an interesting take on the story about a boy who turned into a mouse and a group of witches. But unfortunately, due to developmental hell and working on other projects, he would later on be a co-writer of the movie alongside with Robert Zemekis, whom I think that there's no introduction with Robert Zemekis. He's very well known with Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Castaway.
A couple of really bad motion capture CGI movies.
Oof, yeah. So very similar to Tim Burton. Around the 2000s, Robert Zemekis went into an interesting direction when it came to doing films. He thought that, like motion capture movies were the way of the future, where he did Polar Express and Beowulf and Mars Needs Moms. Ugh.
It's interesting you mentioned Tim Burton because I was going to say, this does not feel like a Robert Zemeckis movie. This feels like a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah.
Even I would doubt that. It's not dark enough. It needs more black.
Feels like Roald Dahl's vision mixed in with the color purple.
Yeah, and there's another reason why that is, because we need to talk about the other co-writer of this movie. Kenya Barris, the creator of Blackish, was also a part of this one as well. So
as I like to call it, wokish.
I have not seen the show, so I can't really comment on it.
Neither can I.
So basically, from what I understand, they wanted to go into a completely different direction with his adaptation of The Witches. Instead of a British-Norwegian kid and taking place around the 1980s, we have an African-American kid, and it takes place in Alabama in the 1960s. It's an interesting direction. I mean, I know that a lot of people have complained about, like, what about with, why doesn't Roald Dahl integrate more races into his books. And it's like, here's the thing, Roald Dahl is a British Norwegian writer, and he was just writing about stuff that was pretty common at the time. And if you remember, he was originally going to make Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory into an African kid, but then the 1960s movement happened, and let's not get into that. So I guess in a way it kind of happened, in which we do have a Roald Dahl character become African American, so there's progress. Anyway, so as mentioned before, this movie was supposed to be released in theaters, but due to then we had to have this massive delay, and then eventually HBO Max came about and say, we'll release the movie. And so here we are. And okay, one more thing I want to bring up right before we discuss about the plot of this. So one of the posts that I did online not too long ago was that I decided to look up every single Roald Dahl adaptation on Rotten Tomatoes and find out what are the scores of each film. And wow.
It's a landslide, isn't it?
Okay.
I was really hoping that, I thought there was going to be justification to not only for this to be a Roald Dahl retrospective, but at least be like, in search of the Crystal Skull territory, but it doesn't even get to that close.
Not even close. Like,
oh, give me the Crystal Skull any day over this.
I can see where you're coming from.
I didn't think this was a bad movie. I'm just going to say this, but then again, I never saw the 1990 Witches, so I don't really have a frame of reference, but it wasn't bad. It was just insubstantial, but I guess I can get into that later when we discuss the movie itself.
I would have honestly liked to have seen what Guillermo del Toro's original vision for this would have been.
I'm sure it would have been so good. That's why I'm so disappointed, because Guillermo del Toro is an amazing director. His visuals speak for themselves, and his storytelling is incredibly risky.
Yeah, with Robert Zemekis, you mentioned all the movies of his that I loved.
Mm-hmm. I love those too.
Yes, as I've said before on my own show, in the 2000s, that's where he became less about visual effects being a method of storytelling and more about visual effects being the everything.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Like, 80s and 90s Robert Zemeckis has used visual effects, but they were part of the story. They weren't the crux of the entire presentation. Roger Rabbit, you have a mixture of animation and live action, but the story was what made it so great. Forrest Gump, there was integration of some CGI mixed in. So when Forrest Gump was able to meet up with a lot of the celebrities who have long since passed, that worked with the story. Castaway, you have the amazing scenes where you have, Tom Hanks in the plane, and, he's stranded in the desert, and he's able to basically survive on his own. And it's a great character piece about, you can take one actor and have that be in a good majority of the film, and people will be entertained by it. That is a good example of good storytelling. But unfortunately, since Polar Express, that was when he decided that visual effects were going to be the juxt of it. And that was where he really suffered. Even after he went to do Oscar bait drama films, such as Flight and Welcome to Merwin, which was a major bomb, by the way.
What the heck even was that movie?
I don't know. The only thing I know about it is, like, you have Steve Carell and he's talking to a bunch of dolls or something.
And they come to life in his imagination because he suffered some sort of some incident where, people beat the crap out of him, and this is how he recovers.
That's kind of dark.
Yeah.
It was. I've seen people who watched it. They didn't like it very much, so I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. So, bottom line, Robert Zemeckis was not in a good place. He, I think even Movie Curiosities on Manic Expression even mentioned this, that, he was a washed-up has-been who hasn't been relevant in almost 20 years. And he was even shocked when he heard, okay, Robert Zemeckis is going to be doing The Witches. This will be a very nice return to form. But sadly, it was not. So going back into the Rotten Tomatoes thing I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to read off the Rotten Tomatoes scores on all of the theatrical movies. Four Rooms doesn't count because it was only a quarter of the story based off of a Roald Dahl short, and we're not going to count that. I'm talking about full adaptations. 36 Hours, 80%. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 90%. The Witches, 93%. James and the Giant Peach, 91%. Matilda, 90%. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, 83%. Fantastic Mr. Fox, 93%. The 2016 adaptation of the BFG, 74%. Revolting Rhymes, 85%. And now finally, The Witches, 2020, 49%. Ouch.
I think we're not going to really find too much discussion, I think, in all of this, because I think we're all in kind of agreement. Yeah, this has not been good by any stretch of the imagination.
Still a higher approval rating than Congress has.
Oh. Anyway, moving on.
I think it's still worth talking about because it's interesting because it's interesting to see where this went wrong. For me, so far, this is we're almost to the end of the year, and I'm already dubbing this my personal pick for worst film of the year. But that doesn't mean that there's not entertainment value to be had here.
Sure.
For starters, I think where they went right with this, for those of you who are unaware of the story, it's about a kid who loses his parents in an accident and ends up living with his superstitious grandmother who believes in witches. Because in this particular case, there's, witches in the area. They decide to go ahead and move off to disappear away to a bit to a hotel where there happens to be a witch convention going on. For the first portion of this movie, when the boy is grieving and getting over the loss of his parents, and his grandmother is there to cheer him up, I admit that's kind of sweet.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you say, okay, it might be a different take on the source material. I'm ready to roll with this.
Okay.
And then we see a girl getting turned into a chicken. And it's supposed to be frightening, but it's the gosh darn funniest thing you'll ever see.
And really, it kind of just makes nothing else make any more sense because, I know we're jumping a bit ahead here, but does anyone else dislike the design of the witches?
It's kind of okay. Like when I first saw the trailer reveal, when they had Anne Hathaway taking off her wig, I thought, she kind of looks good bald. But then they show the three-pronged fingers and the toes and those wide-ass Melina from Mortal Kombat thing smiles, and I was like,
that's what I'm talking about. So they've got these magical powers, right, to disguise to turn someone else into like a completely different molecular form, but they don't seem to have the ability to have the sides of their cheeks not be so obvious that they basically have extra teeth. I'm sorry. With all due respect to the Heath Ledger's Joker Appreciation Club, I just think they could have done. It doesn't really make up in continuity between those two things. It was really off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Yeah, the witch designs in this, I believe that I read that they were going for more of something that was inspired by the illustrations in the book. Which, okay, somebody partaking in this actually read the book. Good for you.
I was expecting your first lines of Van Hathaway to be, do you know how I got these scars?
Oh, God. All the extra witches, though, hopefully they just wore bald caps because I'd hate for them to think I shaved my head for a 49% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh.
I shaved my head for a 49% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Hell,
I
shave my head every couple of months for free. They're clearly going for something in book inspired, but oddly snake inspired at the same time. Of all the things that they would have to apologize later on, the fact that it's the fact that the villains in this are polydactyl and not the overall quality of the film itself.
Oof. Okay, so let's get this out of the way, people. So remember a few months ago when we were discussing about the 1990 adaptation of The Witches, where there was some controversy involving with the fact that parents were complaining to the producers saying this movie scared my kids. And there was also the complaints from actual witches or people who perform witchcraft like Wiccans saying this movie was offensive to my kind because you portray us as stereotypes. That is absolutely nothing compared to the complaints that this movie had when it came to the disability group, where they were saying that when they saw the three-pronged hands of them, they were offended by it because then they were saying that this is a derogatory term for people who were disabled.
Yeah, and also on top of that as well, it just made them look really impractical because, like, I mean, I was, if it wasn't for the fact that they can like fly and like do magic and stuff like that, I mean, yeah, it just feels like really uncomfortable just to kind of watch, really, like, just have them, just have them like, yeah, I just feel really bad saying this, but they kind of like took away like some of like the thought process of like they're so distracting, like because you just want to concentrate on like, oh hey, these are a threat, but then it's like, oh hang on a second, they haven't got many fingers, like
it is distracting, yeah,
inoffensive or anything like that. It takes away from the fact that you've got like someone with magical powers in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's so distracting.
Yeah, one of the knocks I have against this movie in particular is not so much that. Let's take into account if you compare Anne Hathaway's performance to Angelica Houston's in the original. Angelica Houston practically seems like she walked out of the book.
Yes,
that's one of the best things that you can say about the original adaptation. This is hammy, over-the-top acting, and it's just we have 2 Oscar winners in this movie.
Yeah,
this is one of them, and it's aiming for a Razzie nomination.
Here's the thing about this, like, you've got, I mean, I was reading some of the reviews and they were saying, oh, Anne Hathaway's performance actually carries this movie. No, it doesn't. Like, remove your, she announces like removing your wigs. Like, it's like some kind of like amazing thing that happens in the movie and all people do is just take off their wigs. It's like, wow. Like, what an astounding moment in the movie to where like announce it to like, everyone in a 5-mile radius.
I kind of liked Anne Hathaway's performance. She knew what she was doing was like, hammy and campy, but she looks like she's having a blast doing it. It's like like Jeremy Irons in Dungeons and Dragons. She knows the movie is not going to be that good, but she's going to have fun with it. And
maybe she had a couple of glasses of wine before they let her on set.
Maybe.
I guess maybe the reason why is because, as mentioned earlier, that a lot of people are going to compare this movie to the 1990 adaptation, very similar to how they compared Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So the fact that a lot of people are going to say Anne Hathaway's portrayal is nothing like Angelica Houston's, it's like, yes, they're 2 completely different portrayals of the Grand High Witch. Whereas Angelica Houston's portrayal was, a bit over the top as well, but she was also very frightening. And also she gave a bit of a scare when she fully revealed herself.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's Anne Hathaway's portrayal, in which you're right, Jim, she does look like she's having a lot of fun with this performance. She's hammy, she's over the top, and she acts like that way throughout the course of the film. And, they're 2 different performances, but does it work for the story? Especially since it's supposed to be a story that scared a lot of people. And, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of hard to say. Personally, for me, I think that Angelica's performances was perfect because she was able to get in the over-the-top with the frightfulness as well. And not to say that I don't like Anne Hathaway. When she does a role really good, she is amazing. She's probably the best thing that happened in the Les Miserables musical movie. And Devil Wears Prada and, various other movies. But here, I think that because they're trying to get this not only as a comedy, but also to scare people, it's like, it doesn't fit with the tone. And the scene that you were mentioning earlier, James, about the fact that the grandmother's friend turned into a chicken, compare that to in the original film, in which when she was telling the story to her grandson about how her friend disappeared and that she was trapped in a painting, and that she was slowly growing old as time went on, and then one day the painting of her is gone and we know she's dead.
That is horrifying right there.
Yes, it is.
What I'm seeing in this particular case, it's not just the fact that she turns into a chicken. It's how she's acting. You know, she's bucking her head, whatnot. And then the next day, we just sort of see her in the pen, and I'm just watching the movie with friends, just sort of joking along, like, you wear a disguise to look like human guys, but you're not a man, you're a chicken.
You're a chicken.
Now, here's the thing. If this scene were to work, you know that scene in which when the parents went outside, it's like, wow, that's a big chicken. Now, here's the thing. If they really wanted to go there, they could have just taken the chicken inside to the house, and then we just heard a balk. And that was the last thing we would hear. If they were to pull that off, man, that would have been so good. It would have been scary.
That would have been, that would have been pretty creepy to do. And like, they didn't do it. They just like said, no, they just kept it in the coop. It's like, and I went to go see it, to talk to it every day. It's like, way to make not people think you're crazy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The plot progresses. Every moment that was frightening about the original film, when the hero kid, bravo for naming the lead kid here Hero Kid, and not an actual name.
Yeah, his name was Luke in the original,
Nameless.
When he first encounters a witch, it's so brief that you don't really care about it. With the original, I remember being a kid, seeing him being approached by that lady while he was in the treehouse, and I was I was afraid of strangers after that. Like, they brush over that so quickly, and this is my first major gripe of the film. When he tells his grandmother that there was a witch, that's when she decides to go to the hotel, and her reasoning. Maybe it's the time period that they're in.
It probably will be the time period.
Maybe it's because of the writer, but she says, oh, well, we need to go where the white people are at because a black kid disappears in this neighborhood. Nobody cares about it, but white kids disappear. Somebody's going to make a big stink about it. What? Hold the phone.
Yeah.
Was race ever an issue in this story? Did it ever need to be an issue?
Well, this is 1968 Alabama.
Yeah,
so like that's what I was fearing the entire time I was watching the movie. It's kind of like, we're going to get these like undertones of like, hey, there's some black people in a white hotel, like, and they pretty much literally put that front and center and didn't even try to disguise it. All the bellhops like who were like going around who were obviously black themselves. Like I say, we're even amazed at the fact that there's a woman with a child of black origin going in to stay as a guest at this hotel.
But you try to say something like that to try to say that to try and imply that witches won't go after white children, and then the rest of the movie, what are witches doing? They're going after white kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this completely falls flat on its face.
Try to go.
Welcome to the rest of the movie, James.
Metaphor and they fail. Yeah, I was just gonna say they try to go for a social metaphor and they fail completely.
Yeah. Now here's the thing that I think that would have been interesting. So, if they wanted to go into that direction, then sure, go for it. But you just can't cop out until early on. It just makes it feel weak. Like, if you wanted to make it into a completely different time period, then play around with that. They changed the time period by 2 decades. They changed the nationality and the color of the main character from the book. If, they wanted to go that direction, I would have liked that. But the fact that they didn't felt like a wasted opportunity. The reason why they go to the hotel in the first place in the book was that they wanted to have a nice vacation. And it just so happened that the grandmother was going through pneumonia and she was coughing and sneezing and all that kind of stuff, and she had to be in bed, while the boy was able to go around and train with his mice, William and Mary. But here, they saw the witch at the corner store, and then she's, does her little voodoo thing, and then she's like, no, we need to leave. We need to go over to this one place now. And she has this little bit of a intuition. And then the intuition is completely off because they just so happen to go to the same hotel where there's a witch convention. There could have been so many opportunities where they could have felt the intuition saying, this place is not a good place to go to. There were 2 instances, and one we'll get to later. But that one right there, where the grandmother was like doing her little thing and saying like, you know, I know a place that we can go to. She didn't step in and was like looking around saying like, oh, you know, I feel a sense that we may not be safe. We need to be, you know, go somewhere else immediately. So in a way, it's kind of the grandmother's fault that the boy turned out this way.
Yeah.
I want to look up on one plot point. What does it all feel like? The grandmother's like some kind of like voodoo, you know, priestess or something like that. Like
she's a Christian mystic or what have you. Yeah, she follows 2 completely separate religions here. I find that fascinating. I let that slide because at least they tried to do something with that later on when trying to turn the kids back after they've been turned into mice. But I guess it's not. I guess her power's not strong enough.
Needs more Jesus.
Oh my God. Okay then. Anyway, so another thing that should have been addressed earlier is that when the grandmother was giving the pet over to the nameless boy and saying, this is yours, and he's like, okay, I'm going to name it Daisy. And then you have the scene in which when throughout the course of the movie, we have this Daisy mouse who is looking at the boy and then looking around, and then we see the Grand High Witch coming in and she doesn't say anything. It's only until when, you know, Bruno's in danger. Oh, by the way, we'll get to Bruno in a minute because I have some issues with him.
You do? Okay.
Yes, I do.
I do too, so I look forward to hearing you tear them down.
Okay, so then she's like, I gotta save him. And then Aaron and I were just like, yeah, just like, wait, what? Now this mouse can talk? Where did this come from? And then she didn't do the same thing with her owner. She did it for a complete stranger where she was trying to save him, kind of, but it didn't exactly work out for the Grand High Witch. And then she didn't do anything for the boy and preventing him from turning into a mouse. Like, okay, consistency much?
That's a very good point.
Like, she was able to save Bruno when he's a mouse. She didn't, then when they grabbed the boy and then they were about to turn him into a mouse, which I thought was really clever that he was able to seal his mouth and then they poured Formula 86 into his ear. That's clever. But then you're not going to say that Daisy couldn't have just ran up to the Grand High Witch and maybe like bit them before they got into the potion, and maybe he could have like try to crawl into the ventilation system. It's like, okay, Daisy, you could have helped your owner who was caring for you and you were doing tricks together. No? Okay.
Yeah, that was a massive continuity error in that, like, you know, you'd managed to form a relationship with this kid and you couldn't even manage to, like, you know, convince him that, you know, you might be able to talk. You know, like witches and things like that, you know, like, apparently a talking mouse is too much, apparently, for this kid to handle. But witches...
yeah, exactly. Daisy could have said much earlier when the witches were walking in. I mean, I know it would have been shocking, but it's like, oh no, it's the Grand High Witch. Boy, we need to get out of here. Crawl through the ventilation shaft. Let's escape. Because
even at that point, I was kind of like, I wasn't really taking the threat all that seriously. I just kind of looking at Hannah Hathaway, like all gouged up in purple, and it's kind of like, you know, all your base belong to us. It's like, you know.
No.
Someone sent us up the witch bomb. But
isn't this the truth though? We can't take this movie seriously. It's full of memes. It's full of like just crazy overacting and like just stuff that just doesn't make sense. You know, like, and unfortunately that goes on for like the first and second acts of the movie.
Before we get off track, we're talking about Daisy / Mary here. Oh yes, her real name was Mary when she was a kid.
And they keep calling her Daisy.
Yeah, so that's weird. Voiced by, let's see, this is a child voiced by the ever-childish Kristen Chenoweth.
That was weird, by the way. Why couldn't they get another kid actor?
I guess you could argue she's been a mouse for a while, so maybe she's a little bit older, but man, that voice is annoying.
Yeah, like, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, maybe she is, but then she was like saying, you know, I'm an orphan and I was caught by the witches and here I've been a mouse ever since. It's like, that would have been an interesting backstory. Let's explore more into that, because she's based off of William and Mary, the boys' pet mice. And so they cut off William, so they have Mary into the mix. It's like, if you're going to have this character alongside with the boy and Bruno, do something with it.
Gotta have a girl mouse in there because,
Sure.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me like one of my complaints of like the Smurfs movie that there was that scene in when Smurfette was like talking about her backstory about like being a trap created by Gargamel, and then she was then made into a good Smurf, and it was like that would have been like warranted, like a segue cut or something like that, like all that happening or something like that. That kind of like would have been good to, they did a segue for when, Grandma was talking about when her friend was turned into a chicken. I mean, Daisy or Mary or whatever isn't, that's a pretty big thing to like put in a movie and not like give any screen time to it.
No.
Bruno. So I have my issues with Bruno. Okay. So I mentioned this in the original adaptation of The Witches. Bruno is downright useless. And here's the thing. Roald Dahl is not good with his depiction of fat people. We've already established that. They're either Augustus Gloop clones or they're villains. And that's it. I mean, we have Bruce Bogtrotter, Mr. Bogus, and, we have Bruno in this case, in which, like, all he does is saying, I'm hungry. When are we going to eat? Oh, that looks appetizing. Can I have some of that? And he does nothing in this movie. He did nothing in the original Witches. And I'm hoping, if there's one thing that I hope that they take away from this movie, it's like, at least give the characters some more depth. I mean, I get it. It was the 1980s. We had the depiction of fat people. It's like, oh, they're just fat and that's their entire character. We've come a long way with this depiction. Harold Berman and Binky from Arthur and, various amount of other people. Even Steven Universe.
Hurley from Lost.
Thank you. So you can take these characters and just not make their weight as the character or the joke. But nope, not here. He is just as annoying and just as useless as ever.
Imagine how fun this movie would be if the Bruno that came through the bursting through the door was a Sacha Baron Cohen's Bruno.
Oh God, no!
Oh, Jesus!
Shame on you.
Yeah, shame. I feel bad because like they wanted to set up this point where like Bruno is upset because he feels his parents don't care about him, and they really do nothing with that. I mean, even when he's finally revealed as a mouse, do his parents show any distraught over their son's transformation? Are they happy to see him back? No, they just freak out because he's still a mouse and it's played for laughs.
Yep.
At least they get to like the bit in the book where like he tries to show them that it's the kid, but he's stuffing himself full of food, so obviously he's not going to say anything. So at least they stick with that bit.
That's true, but they don't go any further details in that, because in both the original book and in the 1990 adaptation, the parents do figure out that that's Bruno, and so they decided to take him in, even though they're not happy with their son being a mouse. And there's another thing that I'm crazily not, I'm just shocked that they were able to keep this from the original adaptation, is that the kids are happy that they're mice. It's like, what kid would act like this? Like, I'm happy being a mouse. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to worry about growing up. I can just stay little for the rest of my life. What?
It's again, we're going back to the book territory, where occasionally something is brought over from the book that they tried to make work in this remake. Again, the boy actually thinks about it, says, you know what, I don't have as long of a lifespan, so I'm probably going to die around the same time my grandmother does, and I'm perfectly fine with that. They changed that, obviously, with the 1990s Witches because of poor test screenings, and I think that for that movie, that actually works. With all the bizarre, dark things that happen here in that particular adaptation, it feels like a good payoff to, spoiler alert, happy ending. What doesn't work for me here is how they work that into the finale, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So the story continues on just like it does in not only the 1990 movie, but also in the book as well. So we have Luke, Bruno, Mary, and the grandmother are going to steal Formula 86. So they decided to steal it because in the original, they were going to use it to put into the split pea soup. But in this one, they decided, okay, in addition to the split pea soup one, we're going to actually try to see if we can make an antidote. And I like that idea. I like that they were actually trying to see if they could be able to cure themselves because, well, the grandmother has, her, connections with like herbs and, natural healing. Okay, fantastic. And, I think it would have been, a cop-out if they would have found the cure like midway into the movie. But no, they decided that they were going to take matters into their own hands, saying, okay, now we need to be able to, give the witches a taste of their own medicine by implementing Formula 86 into the split pea soup.
Wouldn't it be great if when Grandma was working on the potion, it just said user error?
Here's something that bothers me, though. Why do they stop? They stop after only just one try. I mean, why doesn't she try to keep refining the potion?
Yeah. They could have done that. Like
maybe they try and make it final by saying that, oh, this is the most powerful component I've got. It's holy water from Lords. Like she went she went to go see the Pope or something, and that's he gave it to her. Like,
I don't
think
think
holier
so.
than this.
I don't know. I think that maybe, I think that it would have been an interesting idea if maybe when they got home and, the grandmother had access to all of her natural healings and her herbs and all that stuff, maybe they could have tried. Maybe there would have been an interesting montage of, while they're going around the world and killing all the witches across the globe, maybe she was trying to make an antidote. And maybe we got to see the mice grow older as time goes on and her growing older as time goes on, but it's not working. Like, I could have seen that happen.
Kept it going and here's the thing about the whole accepting just being mice. It makes me feel like there's a scene missing where Daisy and our main character basically spoke with one another, and maybe the main character was saying, oh well, I'm really bummed about being a mouse, and maybe Daisy says, well, I've been a mouse for a lot longer than you have, and it's not been so bad, and just starts pointing out some like the advantages of being a mouse. And then eventually it would have been interesting if they had that, and then we had the grandma still trying to keep trying again to create the potion. Then finally she gets it, but then when she offers it to her grandson, he just turns it right around and says, you know what, I've been a mouse for so long, I can't imagine being anything else, and I can't imagine going back to being a kid anymore.
That would have been a sequel that would never happen.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to judge it by how the story tells itself. When we get to the scene where, the witches all start turning into mice. Kudos for one thing. In the book's depiction, they describe this as a painful operation because not only are you feeling fur push out of every pore in your body at once, that's like having every zit you've ever had in your life force itself forward. That's got to be painful. And your body's shifting, so that's, I guess, arthrital pain. When they try and make that work in here, they get a nice close-up of these characters as they're transforming. They look like they turn into grapes before they turn into mice.
Yeah, that was a weird visual aspect, the bubbling pustules, and this movie has a lot of weird and somewhat disturbing visuals for the transformations.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot more frightening in the original because they were going for something more American Werewolf in London.
Because it makes a lot of sense because it is the Jim Henson Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You almost have the Grand High Witch doing the same. Now, I have read the book. It is a little bit of a cop-out in the book version to have them give the witches the potion and then just sort of leave them to that, but don't actually show it. That's kind of how the book goes, and in a movie, you got to have a little bit more of a climax. So that's what this movie tries to go for. It's a pivotal moment in which the Grand High Witch doesn't have the soup yet, but she recognizes the grandmother from when she was a kid, walks over to her and says the immortal line, "Pigtails." And you can tell that this was meant to be a big moment, not just because of how she says it, but if you look on the movie's soundtrack, for the score of the movie, they call this section of the score Pigtails. I am not joking. You can look that up.
I believe you.
This movie has a soundtrack?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
Here's the thing about this, though. I mean, in regards to the finale, I'll give this movie some credit because it looks like they actually do a much bigger build-up than the original movie did. The Grand High Witch doesn't drink the soup, so you get kind of more this final boss kind of feel like when you get towards the end of the movie, like there's going to be the standoff between the Grandma and the Grand High Witch.
And it plays out like a Tom and Jerry cartoon.
Yeah. That was the only part where they actually seemed to successfully build tension in the movie. This movie has a lot of problem trying to build tension effectively. Like every time you think something dramatic's going to happen, it's over too quickly. Oh, the kids turn into mice. Are they going to have trouble with the hotel staff? No, it's no problem. Are they going to have trouble getting the mouse maker potion into the soup? No, they do it easily.
Yeah, and that's an issue with the original as well, in which, like, the original has things that are done way too quickly, and also the fact that there's a lot of scenes that could have been built up for something action-packed or tension, but because we have to stick close to the book, we have to be able to have these scenes go just as quickly. I mean, I even read that, once again, very similar to a lot of these Roald Dahl adaptations, the people behind the movie had to confront with the Roald Dahl estate and the Roald Dahl family so that if they wanted to do any changes or add anything, they had to get their approval. And it's not done by Lizzie Dahl this time. It's actually done by Roald Dahl's grandson, and he's the one in charge of looking up all the other changes and additions that they put into the book. I guess maybe because Lizzie Dahl is reaching her old age, which it makes a lot of sense because she hasn't done it since Fantastic Mr. Fox, and that was over 10 years ago.
It's his fault then.
The Witch's entirety only has like 106-minute running time in this movie. There's Pixar films longer than this movie.
Yeah,
I just feel like saying you can't stick more into this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right, Aaron. Maybe there was some missed scenes that were going to be in this movie, but couldn't because of various reasons. I mean, we don't know. And I guess we won't know until we get to see more insights about the film itself. So, will we get to see a much more deeper director's cut? One never knows.
Well, definitely not now, given the fact that the original launch has basically been a pretty big failure at this point.
Yeah.
HBO Max. Oh, now they're having. They might have Conan and everything else now, Cartoon Network, but hey, they're getting fired at from all sides. The climax to the film. Does anyone else come out of this saying, well, the only reason why why the Grand High Witch is the only one with toes, and the fact that she has mouse traps underneath her bed is to lead to some sort of climax like the one that they had?
Yeah, because here's the thing. There are no toes in any of the other witches. And I can understand the scene in which when the hotel employees are putting mouse traps everywhere because, hey, we are able to, see mice that are crawling around in this hotel, so we need to ask for your permission to put mice traps everywhere. But here's the thing. It's like if the Grand High Witch knew that these kid mice were going to possibly be a threat to her, she could have put more than just under her bed. Why not near her potions? Why not near her chest? Like, seriously.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it almost feels like when logic in video games where they put traps in places which you don't expect to see them, and because it's kind of doesn't really kind of go into the continuity of that. It's just there for a challenge. So it's also as well, when they lowered him down, and it was kind of like you were watching a video game cinematic before obviously you get into the action. And it was kind of okay, where's my controller? I want to make sure the mouse gets the potion and stuff like that. It just felt so unnatural. Did anyone else agree? There's some aspects of this movie that just felt it didn't feel like something that you would naturally see on in a movie. It kind of felt more like hey, this is the beginning of the video.
Yeah, it's very contrived
in the video game.
Yeah.
I think I'll stick mouse traps underneath my bed and completely forget about them until a climax. And then we have off-screen death by her own cat, which doesn't feel earned either for whatever reason.
I disagree with that. I actually thought that was the fact that she got pretty much mauled by her own feline. I think was I don't know. I mean, me and Patricia came out feeling pretty good after that.
But then again, I didn't really like the whole, the Grand High Witch looks like a naked mole rat, and so basically the matron D was like, okay, I'm gonna get you, and then you turn into like green smoke. Okay.
That was disturbing.
I felt it could have been pushed a little bit more, but then again, I'm a sadist, so whatever. Anyway, so I know. I mean, if I want to see like a villain go down, I want them to go down in the most brutal way possible that feels really satisfying. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's the climax. So the climax of the movie we have very similar to the 1990 film, in which there's like this huge Rube Goldberg roller coaster ride thing happening with Bruno the boy and Mary, and then it ends with this montage of them going around and taking pictures of places from all over because they're traveling to, get all the witches around the world. And then it ends off with this huge kid meeting where they're having the formula so that they can kill the kids. It's like, okay, now we have the kids knowing that they're going to be being approached by witches, but they're ready for it. And it's like, okay, kid warriors. Kids Incorporated, Kids Across America. Sure.
How could this possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
I'll accept a few things here. The ending to this, I would almost say, was a good ending on one ground. Or at least it would have been an adequate ending. Like, okay, they almost end with a little dance off there between Grandma and Kid Mice, and that's cute and whatnot. They have Grandma gives a drive-by Jesus message in there, which was not in the book. And I'm sitting here watching with friends, and I realize, okay, I'm a Christian. I don't mind having Christian themes in a film.
Sure.
But that felt so forced when she says that, especially when it's not in the source material.
Mm-hmm.
And with the whole little dance off and showing them riding around on that roller coaster just to show off the special effects, I guess. This would have almost been an adequate ending. They did end the book saying that they were going to go off and seek down all the witches in the United States. You get to that ending with Hero Kid voiced by Chris Rock, all grown up and telling these kids what to do. They need to go out there and give those witches a taste of their own medicine. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, he's leading a cult.
Oh my God.
I know.
He's getting these kids all whipped up about killing witches. He's showing them a slideshow about all the terrible things to do to witches.
Yeah.
And
do you know what would have been better?
I'm just thinking to myself, the outcome of this could be potentially horrifying because he's getting all these kids whipped up about killing the next ugly person that they see.
Do you know what?
This could go very wrong.
I know exactly. I thought that whole scene was just uncomfortable and cringe. But do you know what would be more fun? Instead of having all those kids in there, what if basically they had like all these meeting of like every single witch hunter from all the witch hunter movies. He's basically handing them over like all the potions, saying you got to hunt down all these witches, and you got Vin Diesel from like the last Witch Hunter, and you got Gemma Atherton and Jeremy Renner from Hansel and Gretel, and I doubt you can get Vincent Price from Witchfinder General, but just as like a funny thing, you have like all these witch hunters like from all different movies who are like just there. Just
we get Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stick her in there too.
Maybe
get Buffy, get the Ghostbusters, get Hellboy.
Yeah, just as cameos, just celebrity cameos of like people who've been people who've hunted supernatural beings, and say, okay, we want you guys to go hunt down all the witches, and just if you could do that, and that would have been so funny if they did that.
I ain't going downtown, and I ain't afraid of no witches either.
Yeah. Okay, I think that we've gone on this plot long enough. So I want to briefly talk about the act. In addition to Anne Hathaway, we have the other actors. So I guess we can just briefly talk about them and how we feel about how each of their performance was. So Stanley Tucci, who plays as the maitre d'. So how do you think he did compared to somebody like Rowan Atkinson in the original Witches?
Stanley Tucci is Stanley Tucci here.
Yeah.
You don't need anything else.
That's true.
I'm not blaming the actors for this, though.
No, it's not. It's true. I mean, everybody else are fantastic. I mean, you have not only do you have people such as Anne Hathaway and Stanley Tucci, but also we have other people such as Octavia Spencer, who is amazing, and
She was fantastic. She really gives a lot of heart to her role.
absolutely.
But,
She's playing
again,
the same character she did in The Help, but that works. That I guess you stick to your roots though.
Sure.
To me,
That
I
makes
mean,
it work.
Anne Hathaway's performance was just kind of like, she's putting her heart and soul into it, but it's being executed terribly. From in my opinion, like when she first comes on screen and she has that talk with Mr. Stringer, like I was just I remember like just hearing her first line and I thought, oh god, she's trying to channel Dr. Robotnik from Sonic the Hedgehog. Like that's the vibe I got from this. It's like I mean it made me feel like were they even aware that Jim Carrey was doing Dr. Robotnik when all this was going on? Like
I don't know.
Yeah, it just kind of felt like that, like like I'm the person in charge, and like nope, and that's the joke, that kind of. The minute she walked on screen, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Octavia Spencer plays a young grandma here. She's what, 50?
Yeah, she's way too young here. I mean, if you
She
want
doesn't age.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to argue that maybe she had her daughter at a very young age, like maybe around, I don't know, maybe like in her early 20s or something like that, that could make sense, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's what they were trying to do here. So yeah, that's a little bit off. And I guess Chris Rock is the narrator. Now, Aaron and I have watched every single adaptation of a Roald Dahl movie, and we discussed about all the narrators that were featured. We talked about the narrator from Roald Dahl's Little Red Riding Hood, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and SEO Trot. And also Revolting Rhymes. So how does this narrator stack up with the ones that we've talked about, Aaron?
It's just he kind of sticks out a bit. Like it's Chris Rock, I mean, I like it when he's telling jokes and stuff like that, but in regards to like being narrator of a movie, it's kind of like I still when he was speaking, like I feel really bad saying it. This it kind of reminds me of his stand-up bit when he was talking about doing that PSA of like, I know how to get your ass kicked by the police.
Oh no!
Like, yeah, that's what just. You don't get caught by a witch. Just use common sense.
Sure.
I remember someone
You
saying
have
that
been pulled over by a witch and wondered, is she gonna kick my ass and turn me into a mouse? Well, here you go.
Oh God.
Here's how to avoid witches.
If you take a chocolate and stick that potion down your throat, you deserve to get your ass kicked.
Oh my God! Why are
his narration makes this movie seem more like the darkest episode of Everyone Hates Chris.
Yep, it sure does. Now, personally for me, I would probably put him... Oh, that's really hard. Okay, so the narrators that I find just absolutely great, I'm still going to say it, James Corden's narration in SEO Trot is the best narrator that I've seen so far in a Roald Dahl adaptation. And, people such as Pete Postlethwaite and James and the Giant Peach, they were good, but not enough to carry the film. Then there's people such as the Oompa Loompa from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Again, pretty good, not enough to carry the film. Danny DeVito's was a bit weird because he not only plays the narrator, but he also plays as Matilda's father, so it's kind of weird. And then you have the wolf, who is the narrator of Revolting Rhymes, but he's also a main character. So I guess that plays it off pretty well. I still think that the worst narrator is the one from Roald Dahl's Little Red Riding Hood, not only because he stays too long, but he's drawn out and boring. So Chris Rock's narration. Okay, again, he's not much in the movie, but...
Thankfully.
thankfully. But the fact that he's trying to do this very seriously as like the older boy, the older version of the boy, where he's talking about like how bad witches are, it's very off-putting and jarring, because if they would have had like somebody else portraying this role, I'm sure that it would have been done very well. But because it's Chris Rock, and because not to say that Chris Rock can't be anything but a comedian. He has done roles very well, but I think the direction that he was given with his voice, it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely on the lower spectrum of narrators that I've seen. Not as bad as the one from Roald Dahl's Little Red Riding Hood, but just not as good as everybody else.
Also, I don't know how, even in the continuity of the story, they managed to get people to take this guy seriously enough to like allow their children to like narrate them about how witches are evil and stuff like that. Like, I'm sure Alex Jones of InfoWars would probably have like questions about that, even if it was presented to him.
Oh God!
Remember, Chris Rock is at a point in his career where he needs to do a Saw sequel. So this goes to show the state of his career.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. I think we've gone long enough. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts for me. At least the ending was good. At least it kind of stuck with, instead of like the original movie where they just kind of copped out on it, really. But that's all I can say about it. In regards to the rest of it, in regards to like the entire story, in regards to like the characters on the screen, in regards to where it's set, it just feels like it feels out of place for me, and so I think I will be right to say I think this is probably one of the worst movies of 2020, without a doubt.
This is hands down the worst Roald Dahl adaptation, period. I would recommend watching it on a bad movie night with the right people, just so you can try to have fun with it and pick the flies out of the turd, basically. That's my deal.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I didn't think it was awful, but again, it's kind of just a generally overall mediocre movie. I'd say maybe watch it, as they're saying, if you want to see something funny you can riff on, but otherwise, I would just suggest avoiding it.
Aaron and I have been doing these long marathons of movies to lead up to a good movie, whether it be with Pix Mix when we did it for The Incredibles 2, whether we did it for Dream Machine leading up to How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. And we were hoping that this one was going to be a similar thing. No, it was not.
Can you bring me in for some good adaptations next time?
Yes, I will. I promise.
Did I do something to be hilariously punished?
Well, I haven't brought you with everything bad. We did do the Tiny Toon Adventures How I Spent My Summer Vacation podcast a while ago.
Years ago, yes.
Yes, and I guess it's true. I am overdue to bring you on for something good.
I have to head out, but thank you for having me on again for this final Roald Dahl retrospective. I was glad to be a member.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's something I'm a bit worried about that. So, he might not be wrong when he's saying that this might be the final, Roald Dahl adaptation, because, if people weren't aware, the Roald Dahl family's actually apologized for the anti-Semitic comments that he made a couple of decades ago. And so, unfortunately, with that hanging over everyone's head at the minute, I think we won't be seeing a Roald Dahl adaptation, I think, for a pretty significant time.
We didn't enjoy him for his anti-Semitic comments, whatever they were. We enjoyed him for his children's books. I'm sure if you look back on Dr. Seuss, you can find some terrible things that he said.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the updates regarding about the Netflix series, the ones that Taika Waititi is going to be working on, nor do I know about the adaptation of the Matilda musical. So I don't know about any further progressions with that, but it's going to be interesting about how people are going to feel about the apology from the Roald Dahl family, but that's neither here nor there. So my final thoughts about this movie. I was disappointed with it. I was hoping that this year would be a good year for I can actually watch a movie that was decent. I saw Trolls World Tour. I saw Onward, I saw Scoob, and I saw a few movies that didn't exactly light my world on fire. And I was hoping that this movie, hearing about it for quite a while and, hyping it up alongside with the other Roald Dahl adaptations, thinking that this was going to be another major check into good adaptations, but no, it wasn't.
No.
And
I forgot this movie was even happening until the advertisement came out.
Exactly, yeah. Like people pretty much forgot about this movie. And the reason why I didn't was because I was keeping tracks of it when we were doing the retrospective. But if I wasn't doing the retrospective, I would have forgotten about this movie immediately. But because I wanted to hype it up, watching all of the other films to see how well this stacks up, I was just left very disappointed. Now, comparing it to the 1990 adaptation of The Witches, and I know people are going to be saying, please compare it in your own merit. It's like, I will, and I will. Just give me one moment. Now, now comparing it to the 1990 adaptation, yes, there are some problems with it. Yes, there are some scenes that shouldn't have been there. Yes, there is a bit of a juxtaposition between like serious moments and funny moments, but the things that they were able to pull off, there's a reason why people still remember this movie very fondly, even though that it was a financial failure when it came out. People still remember Anjelica Huston's portrayal of the witch, of the Grand High Witch. People still remember the special effects that the Jim Henson Corporation was able to do. People still remember the fact that they was able to take those risks and scaring off kids, even though that they were able to cut back a lot because of poor test screenings. And also people still remember the fact that it was able to showcase witches in a very scary way, and one that is threatening and one that you don't want to go in contact with. And I respect that they were able to take those directions, despite the fact that they were, you know, they had to remove some scenes and add some funny ones because, you know, Nicholas Roeg's son was frightened of the movie and they had to remove the ending. And I know Roald Dahl was not happy with it. In fact, he decided to remove his stuff from the credits and, you know, he didn't like where the movie was going to go off into. I think that very similar to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he wanted people to avoid the witches and he almost tried to boycott it right before his death. So there's that. But yeah. I'm glad that they were able to take the chances that they did. Do I still have issues with the witches? Yes. I thought that the kid actors were a lot to be desired, and I felt that the story with the Grand High Witch and the grandmother could have been strengthened up. And there were some scenes that were kind of pointless, like the maid with the maitre d' didn't really go anywhere, and the whole Bruno's father flirting with the Grand High Witch didn't go anywhere. So, you know, and the music, it was fine. It just wasn't really that memorable. So I can excuse those faults because of the things that we were able to get from the 1990 adaptation. Now, looking into the 2020 adaptation. Okay, so the actors that they got. So the kid actors are better, in my opinion. They are portrayed much better. They're better actors, and they have a little bit more of experience. Everybody else, when comparing it to Anne Hathaway with Anjelica Huston and, you know, Tucci with Atkinson, it's like they kind of fall a little short. And the additional things that they added in, they didn't strengthen it enough for it to be justified to be added in there. I wish they would have pushed it further, but they didn't. I don't know whether it was due to the fact that you have three really prolific people conflicting with their opinions, and maybe they wanted to add some stuff in there. Oh, and by the way, I completely forgot. One of the producers of this film is Alfonso Cuarón, and he is a very well-known, established Oscar-winning director in his own right. So maybe there was like a lot of conflicting arguments with it. Maybe they had to go into Zemekis's portrayal. I don't know, but I could definitely tell that there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen that kind of like tampered with it a little bit too much. They try to add too much stuff into it without letting it simmer and stew into the point in which like it can be justifiably so with the additional changes.
Yeah, there's with all the talent behind this, it's kind of amazing. This turned out the way that it did, which I think there's a lot of effort put into this film, but it feels like a TV movie.
Yeah, so I guess on its own merits, it's pretty weak. Compared to the original 1990 adaptation, it's pretty weak. Now, when people are arguing about like, oh, you know, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory versus Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, here's the thing. I can at least appreciate Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for taking those risks and for sticking very close to the book. It may not be as whimsical as Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but at least it's able to differentiate itself. And I think that they were trying to do the same thing with this adaptation. But I think that this is going to be the clear-cut winner as to which version is better. And the 1990 version is still going to be the one to look back fondly of. Well, this version, I think, is going to be truly forgotten. Like, I don't think that I think by a few years in, we're not even going to remember this movie.
If anybody wants me to do a From Pages to Pictures on these adaptations, feel free to go to my Patreon. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it. So, guys, I just want to thank you so much for coming on by. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
So,
by the way, Patricia, actually, because this isn't actually I mean, it's a sad end for the Roald Dahl Retrospective, but keep in mind it's not what we're going to be ending the year on. Because you and I got something pretty exciting to look forward to in Christmas Day.
That's right, we do. So, stay tuned for when that comes out. But for the Roald Dahl Retrospective, this is going to be the last adaptation that we will be looking at. And as of the recording of this podcast, we are officially done with the poll. So if you were one of the people who added in your opinions on what the best and worst of the Roald Dahl adaptations were, then we will be reading that next time. But until then, we are done with the retrospective. And James, why don't you plug and promote yourself right before we conclude?
Oh, my name is James Sullivan, aka Jaimetud. Every weekend I run the Drive-In Mutants podcast, and Drive-In Mutants live stream at www.twitch.com/Jaimetud. I'll give you the link to that later. All this month we have the Drive-In Mutants Christmas Marathon, where we're showing Christmas movies all month and giving away fantastic prizes. So stick around every Saturday night. I also have my own YouTube and BitChute channels where I do From Pages to Pictures, showing the difference between books and movies. I've had 2 episodes released already this year with Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. And the one that I have later on going on this month, I'm doing an episode on the 2018 variation of The Grinch. So
Okay.
Keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening, everyone. As mentioned earlier, tune in next month as we're going to be discussing about what your opinion was, according to the polls, the best and worst Roald Dahl adaptations. So until then, we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao for now.